You've been sold a picture, one of devotion, pursuit, and sacrifice. A picture that paints your worth in how hard you chase, how much you give, and how little you ask for in return. It told you love is earned through endurance, that heartbreak means you're doing it right. That to be a man is to constantly prove you're good enough for someone else's standards, even if it breaks you in the process. But what if that picture was a lie? What if you never needed to perform? What if love wasn't a test you had to pass, but a connection that should meet you where you stand? What if losing your peace isn't the price of love, but the sign you're chasing the wrong kind, something shifting? Quietly, beneath the noise, men are starting to pause, not because they're bitter, not because they've given up, but because they've finally asked themselves the question no one ever taught them to speak aloud: what am I losing in this pursuit? And the answer hits hard. They're losing sleep, losing focus, losing their spark. Not because they don't care, but because they care too much in places where effort is never recognized, only expected. They've spent years performing, smiling through misunderstanding, giving without guarantee, adjusting without acknowledgement, and eventually it drains something essential, not just energy, identity. So now they're stepping back. Not storming off, not slamming doors, just pulling their energy inward where it belongs, reclaiming presence, rebuilding peace, realizing that who they are without a relationship might just be the most powerful version of them yet. It's not loneliness, it's clarity. They're learning that silence isn't empty, it's full of answers. That solitude isn't punishment, it's power. That being single doesn't mean being broken, it means being deliberate. And when you stop running after what doesn't value you, real alignment starts to show up. This shift isn't flashy, it doesn't go viral. But it's real, you can feel it in conversations that are shorter, in boundaries that are stronger, in attention that isn't thrown around but chosen carefully. You see it in a man who used to chase hard, now sitting still, content, calm, unapologetically whole. The world might call it detachment, but these men know better. This is self-respect. This is what it looks like when a man rewrites what love means on his own terms. When he's no longer looking to be chosen, but deciding what's actually worth choosing. When he stops seeking permission to be enough and just is. And once he feels that kind of peace for the first time, he never wants to go back. Nor should he. Because sometimes, the most radical thing a man can do is nothing at all. Just stay still and watch everything shift around him. Every date feels like an interview now. Every conversation carries invisible weight. You show up, you try, you give your best, and somehow it's still not right. The rules keep changing. The expectations keep rising. And no matter how much you adjust, it never seems to land. You plan something thoughtful. She's unimpressed. You speak honestly. It gets twisted. You stay quiet to avoid conflict. Now you're emotionally unavailable. There's no winning move, just endless navigation through a maze that keeps shifting its walls. Men are exhausted, not from the effort itself, but from effort that vanishes into silence, from gestures that go unnoticed, from showing up fully and walking away feeling emptier than before. It wasn't always like this. Or maybe it was, and no one talked about it, but now, the weight is undeniable. Text the wrong thing and you're careless. Text too much and you're clingy. Respond fast and you're desperate. Wait too long and you don't care. Every interaction becomes a calculation. Every word gets analyzed for what it might mean instead of what it actually says. Romance has turned into risk management. There's no room for imperfection, no grace for misunderstanding. You're expected to read minds, predict moods, and somehow deliver exactly what's needed without ever being told what that is. And when you fall short, which you will, it becomes evidence, proof that you're not enough. So men start shrinking. They dim their presence to avoid triggering disappointment. They rehearse before speaking. They hold back opinions, preferences, even personality just to keep the peace. And slowly, without realizing it, they stop being themselves entirely. That's the trap. You perform so long you forget there was ever someone underneath. And the cruelest part, none of it guarantees anything. You can do everything right and still be told you're lacking. You can give your whole self and be handed rejection wrapped in vague explanations. No clarity, no feedback, just silence where effort used to be. Eventually, something cracks. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet shift where a man looks in the mirror and no longer recognizes himself. He's tired of dancing for approval, tired of editing his truth, tired of bending into shapes that still don't fit. He starts asking different questions. Not how do I make this work, but why does this feel like labor instead of love? And once that question lands, everything changes. Because connection isn't supposed to feel like survival, it's not supposed to drain your confidence or steal your calm. It should add to your life, not audit it. Men are waking up to this. They're realizing that exhaustion isn't devotion, that confusion isn't chemistry, that constantly proving yourself to someone who never seems satisfied isn't love. It's performance with no applause, and performance without rest leads to one place only: burnout. So the question becomes, how long do you keep auditioning for a role that was never meant to fit? The most dangerous thing a man can do today is simply stop trying so hard. Not quit, not disappear, just ease back, conserve, observe, let the desperation dissolve, and watch what happens next. It starts small. A text left unanswered for a few hours longer. A date suggestion met with a pause instead of instant enthusiasm. A need for space honored instead of explained away. Nothing dramatic, just a subtle pulling inward of energy that used to flow outward without question. And suddenly, everything feels different. Men are discovering that restraint holds power, that not every silence needs filling, that not every conflict needs their immediate repair. They're learning to sit with discomfort instead of rushing to fix it, to observe instead of react, to let things unfold without controlling every outcome. This isn't apathy, it's strategy. For years, men poured themselves into situations that gave nothing back. They initiated every conversation, planned every outing, carried the emotional weight of keeping things alive, and what did it earn them? Exhaustion masked as devotion. Invisibility disguised as reliability. So now they're trying something radical. They're doing less, not out of spite, but out of respect for their own energy. The shift is quiet but unmistakable. Where there was once eagerness, there's now patience. Where there was constant availability, there's now selectiveness. Where there was performance, there's now presence, real, grounded, unshakable presence. Women notice immediately something's changed, but they can't name it. The man who once chased now simply stands still. The man who once explained himself endlessly now offers comfortable silence. The dynamic has shifted without a single announcement, and here's what nobody expected: it works. Not as manipulation, not as games, but as truth finally expressed. Men who stop leaking energy in every direction become magnetic, not because they're playing hard to get, but because they genuinely don't need anything from anyone anymore. That self-sufficiency changes everything. Conversations become optional instead of obligatory. Weekends become personal instead of performative. The phone becomes a tool again instead of a leash. Life opens up in ways that constant pursuit never allowed. Men start prioritizing routines that restore them, habits that strengthen them, friendships that actually reciprocate. They redirect all that chasing energy into themselves, and the returns are immediate. Better sleep, clearer thinking, calmer emotions, a sense of control they forgot existed. This withdrawal isn't about punishing anyone, it's about protecting something precious: their peace, their identity, their right to exist without constantly justifying their presence. And once a man tastes that freedom, once he experiences life without the burden of endless proving, something permanent shifts inside him. He realizes he was never obligated to exhaust himself for connection, that real love wouldn't demand his depletion, that the right person would never require him to shrink, so he stops shrinking, stops chasing, stops performing, and starts performing. Something shifts when a man stops asking whether he's enough for someone else. The question flips. Ki Duwila Day, he starts asking whether they are enough for him, whether the situation deserves his attention, whether the connection earns his investment. That reversal changes everything. Suddenly he's not auditioning anymore, he's evaluating, not performing for acceptance, filtering for alignment. The desperate energy dissolves. What remains is something far more powerful: calm discernment rooted in genuine self-worth. This isn't arrogance dressed up in new clothing, it's clarity earned through exhaustion. Men who reach this point didn't arrive easily. They crawled through disappointment, rejection, and self-doubt first. They earned this stillness the hard way, and now nothing shakes it. Watch a man who's crossed this threshold. His movements carry different weight, no rushing to impress, no scrambling to explain himself. He enters rooms without seeking validation, speaks without calculating approval, exists without requiring permission from anyone. That energy is unmistakable. Women sense it immediately even before understanding why. There's something magnetic about a man who doesn't need you but might choose you anyway. Something irresistible about presence that isn't performed, attention that isn't scattered, focus that isn't desperate. The paradox reveals itself clearly. The less he seeks to be wanted, the more fascinating he becomes. The less available he makes himself, the more valuable his time appears. The less he chases, the more others wonder why, and wonder creates curiosity. Curiosity creates attraction. But here's the crucial difference. He's not manufacturing scarcity. He's not playing tactical games. His unavailability is real because his life is genuinely full. His selectiveness is authentic because his standards are actually high. There's no strategy, just truth. And truth carries a frequency that manipulation can never replicate. Internally, this man operates from different questions entirely. Every opportunity gets filtered through one lens. Does this protect my peace or threaten it? Every person gets measured by one standard. Do they add to my life or subtract from it? Simple questions, revolutionary results. Decisions become effortless when clarity guides them. He declines invitations without guilt, ends conversations without anxiety, walks away from situations without second-guessing. His compass points inward now. External noise rarely disturbs it. This creates something society rarely witnesses anymore. A man genuinely content without romantic validation. A man whose happiness isn't outsourced to someone else's opinion. A man complete within himself before anyone else enters the picture. That completeness becomes his greatest asset because he can offer presence without neediness, affection without desperation, commitment without losing himself. He brings abundance instead of lack, strength instead of dependency, partnership instead of rescue seeking. This is what happens when men stop measuring worth through someone else's eyes. They discover worth was never external, never earned through pursuit, never validated through another person's acceptance. It was always internal, always theirs. And once they see that truth, the entire game transforms. They're no longer players begging for selection. They've become the prize. There's a version of you that exists only when nobody else is watching. A version uncensored by expectation, unfiltered by performance, doable, unedited by the constant need to please. Most men never meet him. They're too busy being who everyone else needs them to be. But something happens when you finally sit with yourself. The noise fades, the pressure lifts, the masks come off one by one until something authentic remains, not lonely, not incomplete, just real, present, undiluted by compromise. Solitude becomes sanctuary. Morning coffee tastes different without walking on eggshells. Sunsets feel richer without defending your mood. Sleep comes easier without replaying arguments that led nowhere. The absence of drama isn't emptiness. It's relief so profound it almost feels foreign. Men conditioned to constant companionship often fear this stillness. They imagine isolation, abandonment, failure made visible. But those who actually enter it discover something entirely opposite. Freedom beyond description. Your schedule becomes yours again, not negotiated, not compromised, not subject to someone else's emotional weather patterns. You wake when rested, eat when hungry, create when inspired, rest when depleted. Every decision flows from authentic need instead of external obligation. This isn't selfish living, it's intentional existence. Finances transform alongside everything else. Money stops performing for approval. No expensive gestures designed to prove worth. No investments made to satisfy someone else's expectations. Resources flow toward actual goals instead of relational peacekeeping. Savings grow, options multiply, security builds quietly without fanfare. The apartment or house reflects only you now. Books you actually want to read, music you genuinely enjoy, spaces organized for your peace rather than someone else's comfort. Small details that collectively scream this life belongs to me. And within these walls, something miraculous unfolds. Interests buried under years of compromise resurface unexpectedly. The guitar collecting dust gets played again. The half-finished novel finds new chapters. The workout routine intensifies without resentment or scheduling conflicts. Hobbies return like old friends thought lost forever. You remember who you were before you started shrinking. Friendships deepen in this space too. real ones, reciprocal ones, connections built on mutual respect rather than proximity to your relationship status. Men rediscover brothers they neglected while chasing romantic validation. Those bonds strengthen without jealousy or competition for attention. Community replaces codependency. Perhaps most transformative is the silence itself, not empty silence, generative silence, the kind where thoughts complete themselves, where patterns become visible, where intuition sharpens because nothing drowns it out. You learn your own rhythms, your triggers, your needs, your boundaries. You become fluent in the language of yourself after years of translating for everyone else. This self-knowledge compounds daily. Each week alone adds clarity. Each month builds confidence. Each year strengthens the foundation upon which everything meaningful must eventually rest. Solitude isn't the absence of connection. It's the birthplace of authentic connection, starting with the relationship that matters most, the one with yourself. Nothing prepares you for watching your life divide into boxes, furniture split down the middle, photo albums sorted like evidence, holidays negotiated like business mergers, the home you built becoming just another asset on a spreadsheet. Divorce doesn't just end a marriage. It dismantles identity itself. Men who defined themselves through partnership suddenly face terrifying emptiness. The role of husband evaporates overnight. The daily rhythms of shared life vanish completely. Even your children become appointments scheduled by strangers in courtrooms who know nothing about bedtime stories or Saturday morning traditions. Everything familiar becomes foreign. The first night alone hits differently than expected. Not just lonely, disorienting. The silence echoes with ghosts of conversations. The empty side of the bed screams louder than any argument ever did. You realize how much of yourself existed only in relation to someone else. That realization breaks something open, but broken things sometimes reveal hidden foundations. Beneath the rubble of collapsed expectations lies something unexpected, something solid, something that was always there, but buried under years of accommodation and compromise. Your actual self. Rebuilding begins slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. Small decisions made without consultation, meals chosen without negotiation, weekends structured around personal restoration instead of relational obligation. Each tiny act of autonomy adds mortar to crumbling foundations. Freedom tastes strange after imprisonment. Financial clarity emerges from the chaos eventually. Expenses once hidden become visible. Spending patterns once controlled become choices. Money transforms from battleground to building material. Every dollar now invests in future stability rather than present peacekeeping. Independence grows from the ashes. Men emerging from divorce develop instincts sharper than any they possessed before. They recognize manipulation instantly now, spot entitlement from miles away, understand exactly what healthy reciprocity looks like because they've lived so long without it. Experience becomes their most valuable teacher. Patterns once invisible become glaringly obvious. The lessons carved to pain become permanent principles. Never again will they abandon themselves for approval. Never again will they sacrifice peace for temporary companionship. Never again will they confuse tolerance with love or accommodation with partnership. Boundaries become non-negotiable. Mornings without conflict become sacred rituals. Evenings without emotional labor become precious gifts. The calendar belongs entirely to them, now marked by personal goals rather than obligatory appearances. Something unexpected happens during this reconstruction. Gratitude replaces bitterness eventually. Not gratitude for the pain, but for the awakening it forced. The collapse that seemed like destruction becomes foundation for something stronger, something truer, something that couldn't exist while maintaining a life built on misalignment. Divorce taught what happiness never could, that losing everything sometimes means finding yourself, that failure by society's standards sometimes means freedom by your own, that the worst possible outcome, feared for years, actually contained liberation beyond imagination. Rock bottom became launching pad, and men who survived it carry wisdom that comfortable lives never provide. They know exactly who they are now. Nobody can take that again. Numbers don't care about feelings. They simply reveal what's actually happening beneath the stories we tell ourselves. And right now, the numbers are painting a picture that society isn't ready to acknowledge. Men choosing intentional solitude consistently score higher on every well-being metric that matters. Lower stress hormones, deeper sleep cycles, improved cardiovascular markers, reduced anxiety levels, greater reported life satisfaction. The research keeps confirming what these men already know. Instinctively, independence isn't isolation, it's optimization. Meanwhile, contrasting data tells an uncomfortable truth. Individuals trapped in misaligned relationships show elevated cortisol around the clock. Their blood pressure spikes during ordinary interactions. Sleep becomes fragmented and unrestorative. Focus deteriorates steadily. Mental health erodes invisibly until crisis forces acknowledgement. The comparison isn't subtle, it's stark. Men stuck in high conflict partnerships display chronic stress signatures identical to those facing ongoing workplace harassment. Their bodies exist in permanent defense mode, fight or flight activated continuously, no recovery period, no genuine rest, just endless vigilance disguised as commitment. That's not love. That's survival mode. Financial patterns reinforce these biological findings dramatically. Single men prioritizing personal development consistently accumulate wealth faster. Their investment portfolios grow without negotiation. Career advancement accelerates without domestic interference. Economic mobility remains unobstructed by competing priorities. The wealth gap between aligned singles and misaligned couples widens yearly, not because relationships are inherently expensive, but because wrong relationships drain resources endlessly. Emotional costs convert to financial costs. Stress spending replaces strategic investing. Conflict resolution consumes energy that productive work demands. The economics of misalignment are devastating. Mental health statistics complete this picture brutally. Depression rates among men in imbalanced partnerships exceed those of intentionally single men significantly. Anxiety disorders cluster around relational dysfunction rather than relationship status. The presence of partnership predicts nothing, the quality of partnership predicts everything. Being alone beats being poorly accompanied every single time. Longitudinal studies tracking men through decades reveal compounding effects clearly. Those establishing boundaries early enter midlife as stability. Those chasing validation endlessly enter midlife depleted. The divergence begins small but accelerates exponentially over time. Two paths, two completely different destinations. Productivity research adds another dimension entirely. Or do not men with protected personal space demonstrate measurably higher creative output? Fewer distractions mean deeper work. Clear boundaries enable sustained focus. Emotional stability fuels consistent performance rather than erratic bursts between conflicts. Independence literally makes men more effective. These patterns transcend demographics. Age doesn't change them. Income doesn't change them. Education doesn't change them. The correlation between autonomy and flourishing remains consistent across every population studied. Science has spoken clearly. This tight alignment creates thriving. Misalignment creates deterioration. And relationship status alone predicts absolutely nothing about either outcome. Men seeing these numbers finally have validation for what their bodies already knew. The exhaustion wasn't weakness. The withdrawal wasn't failure. The choice of solitude wasn't inability to connect. It was intelligence recognizing what works and adjusting accordingly. She says she wants to be heard. He hears a problem needing solution. She shares feelings seeking connection. He offers fixes seeking resolution. Both trying genuinely, both missing completely. The gap between them grows wider with every misunderstood exchange. This isn't miscommunication, it's fundamental mistranslation. Men and women often operate from entirely different emotional operating systems, neither wrong, neither superior, just profoundly incompatible without conscious effort to breach the divide. And most relationships lack that conscious effort entirely. So frustration multiplies invisibly. He withdraws to process internally. She interprets withdrawal as punishment or rejection. She pursues conversation to feel connected. He experiences pursuit as pressure demanding immediate performance. Both escalate trying to solve what escalation only worsens, round after round, year after year. Men learn painful lessons through these cycles. Vulnerability shared openly often returns as ammunition later. Emotions expressed honestly get catalogued for future conflicts. Openness that should build intimacy instead creates liability. So walls rise naturally. Protection replaces transparency. She calls him emotionally unavailable. He calls it survival. Neither understands the other's experience genuinely. She cannot fathom why sharing feelings creates distance. He cannot fathom why solving problems creates offense. The languages sound similar but mean entirely different things. He says nothing changed, meaning nothing significant happened. She hears dismissal of her entire emotional reality. She says we need to talk, meaning connection is desired. He hears criticism is coming, meaning defense is required. Same words, opposite interpretations. Over time, men develop translation fatigue. Every conversation requires decoding. Every statement needs interpretation. Every silence carries hidden meaning demanding analysis. The mental load becomes unsustainable. Eventually, shutdown feels easier than endless deciphering. Communication becomes exhaustion. Women experience this shutdown as abandonment. The man who once engaged now offers only surface responses. The partner who once pursued now maintains careful distance. She reaches harder. He retreats further. The cycle accelerates toward inevitable collapse. Nobody intended this destruction. Both entered wanting connection. Both invested effort genuinely. But effort without understanding accomplishes nothing. Love without translation creates isolation. Good intentions without compatible expression generate only confusion. The mismatch isn't anyone's fault. But recognizing it changes everything. Men who understand this dynamic stop blaming themselves for failures that were actually incompatibilities. They stop contorting into shapes, hoping to finally be understood. They accept that some connections simply lack the foundation for genuine communication, and they become radically selective. Rather than spending decades teaching someone their language, they seek those who already speak it. Rather than endless translation draining their reserves, they find natural alignment requiring minimal interpretation. Rather than performing understanding they don't feel, they wait for recognition that flows effortlessly. Compatibility cannot be manufactured. It either exists naturally or exhausts itself into extinction. Men finally learning this truth save themselves decades of frustration. They stop forcing connections that require constant work and start recognizing ones that simply flow. What remains when you're gone matters more than who noticed while you were here. That realization hits men somewhere between their 30s and 40s. Suddenly, approval seems trivial. Impact becomes everything. The question shifts from am I loved to what am I building that outlasts me. Legacy redefines itself completely. For generations, men measured significance through family, wife, children, grandchildren. Your bloodline continuing meant your life mattered, but that definition was always incomplete. Always dependent on others for validation, always vulnerable to circumstances beyond control. Now men are expanding the meaning entirely. The business you build employs people decades after you've departed. The skills you master get passed to students who teach others. The ideas you share ripple through minds you'll never meet. The problems you solve benefit strangers across generations. That's legacy without permission from anyone. Creation becomes the ultimate expression. Every hour invested in building something meaningful compounds eternally. Every relationship pursued for validation evaporates the moment it ends. One leaves permanent marks on the world. The other leaves only memories that fade with time. The math becomes obvious eventually. Men awakening to this truth redirect their energy dramatically. Passion projects neglected during relationship maintenance suddenly receive full attention. Business ideas postponed for domestic stability finally get launched. Creative works abandoned for someone else's comfort emerge from dusty corners. Purpose replaces pursuit. This shift doesn't reject family or partnership, it simply refuses to depend on them for significance. A man can build legacy alongside relationships, but he cannot outsource his meaning to them. That dependency creates fragility, and fragile men leave nothing lasting behind. Contribution becomes the measuring stick. How many lives improved because you existed? What knowledge transferred through your teaching? Which problems got solved through your effort? What beauty emerged from your creation? These questions matter infinitely more than whether someone chose you romantically. Significance flows from giving, not receiving. Men embracing this understand something profound. Romantic rejection cannot erase a business built. Divorce cannot undo skills mastered. Failed relationships cannot diminish ideas shared. Legacy built through contribution remains invulnerable to interpersonal outcomes. That invulnerability creates profound freedom. You stop needing relationships to feel significant. You start wanting them to enhance already meaningful existence. The desperation dissolves. The neediness evaporates. What remains is a man building something permanent who might allow someone to join the journey. That's attractive beyond measure. Purpose-driven men become magnetic precisely because their fulfillment isn't outsourced. Their happiness isn't contingent. Their significance isn't waiting for someone else's validation. They're already complete, already building, already leaving marks that matter. Partnership becomes optional enhancement, not desperate requirement. By choosing legacy over approval, men discover the most profound paradox. The less they need love to feel worthy, the more love seems to find them. The less they chase validation, the more recognition arrives unbidden. Significance attracts what desperation repels. Build something that outlasts you. Everything else follows naturally. If this shifted something in you, you're not alone. You're just early to the truth. Subscribe for more. Keep evolving. Keep choosing yourself.